my name is Tessa Repair and I'm going to be your host for the day. For a while now, there has been a lot of talk on free trade agreements and whether or not we should have them put into place. Like I said, this debate has been going on for quite some time. However, more recently, we have been seeing this topic resurfacing as a major debate due to greater involvement of United States political leaders in recent decades, who are now attempting to remove trade barriers between the United States and our fellow countries. With us today, we have Alexa Carrion and Rachel Ikeda, who are going to be discussing free trade agreements and more specifically, the different impacts free trade agreements have on the United States economy and the concerns for jobs being lost and for jobs being made, and just different takes on the topic. Let's start with you, Rachel. How do you feel that these free trade agreements impact the people and countries?
Free trade agreements have always been a debatable topic, but I believe free trade is beneficial and fair. First off, free trade have made the U.S. economy grow continuously by 0.5 a year. Free trade allows the lowest priced goods to enter the marketplace, and with this, individuals will increase their purchasing power. Higher purchasing power lets individuals to purchase more customer goods with less money. This way, the national economic growth will increase through customer purchases. Free trade can help nations improve job opportunities in the economic market. Companies are allowed to maximize the nation's economic resources and can develop a comparative advantage when producing customer goods. The comparative advantage then usually allows companies to offer higher employee wages because few nations or companies are able to reproduce the specific goods.
And on to you, Alexa. The same questions go for you. What is your take on free trade agreements? And then, of course, why?
Free trade results in jobs being outsourced in big companies due to international workers who are willing to work for less pay with minimal safety precautions and who have more experience. And speaking about working conditions, free trade agreements encourage poor working conditions for workers across seas who don't have the same protective laws in place as America does. Children in these countries are sent to work at a young age and do intense factory work for very little pay and have to endure very unsafe working conditions. In addition, free trade encourages urbanization and leaves small local businesses to fall behind big corporations in the same business. Say there are two farmers, for example. One is a small family farmer and the other is a factory farm. With trade, factory farm will prosper more than the family-run farm due to them being able to offer a cheaper price than the small farm. Situations like this happen all the time with trade agreements.
Alright, so for a follow-up question, I want to focus a little bit more specifically in on the workers and how they are impacted. So from Rachel's perspective, how exactly does free trade help create these jobs? And then from Alexa's perspective, what are some examples of these poor working conditions that the workers have to face due to the free trade agreements?
Many U.S. imports can help create jobs. Oil, for an example, can help reduce gas prices and transportation costs, which allows companies to hire more employees. The price of gas will rise if the U.S. stops importing oil and relies solely on the domestic oil. Not only that, but it can also help create jobs in wholesale, retail, and shipping industries.
Some foreign workers in Jordanian factories who produce products sold at Target and Walmart complain of 20-hour days, don't get paid for months, and are hit by their supervisors who are then jailed because they're complaining.
Alright, so obviously you both believe that there are great impacts on the people who are being involved in these free trade agreements. But do you believe that we should actually enforce these free trade agreements and use them? That's the question. So let's start with you again, Rachel. Based off your previous argument, it's clear to see that you definitely are leaning towards the supporting argument of free trade. But, as Alexa pointed out, there are some aspects that are not great. Do you believe that the goods outweigh the bad? Do you actually think that we should use these free trade agreements, and why?
Yes, I believe that we should use free trade agreements. As I stated before, free trade agreements introduce new jobs and help the economy. As Alexa stated, some countries that are not the United States may experience poor working conditions, but this is not at the fault of free trade agreements. This is the fault of worker laws and rights being enforced by these countries. Free trade is nothing other than simply giving jobless people jobs.
Now, what about you, Alexa? I know earlier you were leaning towards the more concerning aspects of these free trade agreements, but as we saw with Rachel, there are some goods. So do the bads outweigh the goods, or do you think that regardless of some negative outcomes, should we have these free trade agreements? Are they worth it? Why or why not?
Although, Rachel, you do make a compelling argument, free trade agreements encourage these poor working conditions. Free trade agreements thrive on producing goods at a speed that seems inhumanly possible. The fastest producing company wins the free trade, as we saw with the farm example, so these companies are prompted to ignore the well-being of their workers because they want to win in the free trade agreements. So no, I don't believe that we should have free trade agreements.
As a final follow-up question, I want to disregard whether or not you do believe that free trade agreements should be enforced or should not. I think it would be super interesting if we took both of you, who clearly have different perspectives on the situation, and had you approach the situation and the debate from the opposite viewpoint. So Rachel, if you could think of any negatives, any points that you found that Alexa made that were compelling or could consider you to disagree with free trade agreements, and then the same goes for you, Alexa, if you saw any positives in Rachel's argument that made you believe that free trade agreements should be enforced.
I understand the argument that Alexa is making, and it's true that in other countries working conditions are poor, and even children have to have the risk of enduring brutal hours of labor.
Looking at free trade from a different perspective, I can see how it would be beneficial because it increases the national economy by a significant percentage each year.
And so thank you so much to Rachel and Alexa for joining us today on ABC. To wrap up this whole discussion and the main arguments and key points that we saw today, Rachel was pro free trade agreements, so her arguments were based off of the fact that free trade agreements can improve economies and can also improve worker wages in certain situations. As for Alexa, she was against free trade agreements, and her main arguments were that free trade agreements can allow things like poor working conditions to surface, as well as really being only beneficial for big corporations rather than small local businesses.